Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. Welcome to everybody. So let's go into payroll. So one of the things I'd alluded to before was you can access it from the help files. Of course, you can go up to help right up here at the very top of the page and get into the help files. I can also go into my employees contractors. So there's two ways, of course, you can get to your employees and contractors. They're stored in the same place, folks. We don't have one place that are storing contractors and a different place in payroll that stores employees. They're all together. They can just be filtered separately. But you can either go to data setup in the upper left corner and just below that to employees contractors, or right here in the center in the image map, right to employees contractors. And that opens up the employee contractor file, as I call it. I guess it doesn't say file on there, but that's what I call it. So here, this is true about the help files in Church Windows everywhere, okay? If I'm in a particular screen, in this case, employees, contractors, I hit F1 on my keyboard. Notice now it opens the help topic page in help on employees and contractors. That is true of every page in Church Windows. All right, we've written this in such a way where you're on a screen, you hit F1, it should open the help page on that particular topic. If not, please let us know because we'll get that fixed. Okay, but there's lots of information in here under employees and contractors. How that functions. There's, links to other portions in the help topics on like allowances and deductions. And that's good because we're not going to be covering allowances and deductions in detail today, just how those get added to employees, of course. Okay, but I do like to point out that, help is a fingertip, a mouse click or a keystroke away, okay? So use that F1 key. It's mighty helpful with regards to that, okay? When we're in the employee contractor file, it's important to understand that this is where the default setup for your employees or contractors are set up or generated, okay? I'm going to make permanent changes to changes to record here only, okay? This is the permanent setup. This is where payroll gathers its information when you attempt to calculate payroll for either employees or contractors that are set up in payroll, okay? If I'm needing to make a temporary change or override to an employee or contractor's pay, I'm not going to make that here because that means when I'm done, I have to come back and fix it or change it back. I can always make changes to pay amounts and things like that as I'm calculating the payroll itself. So again, if a change is permanent, like a raise is being implemented for an employee or something, or a new pay rate is being entered or something, accounts are being changed, this is where those changes will be made or entered, okay? This is where employees and contractors are linked to accounting as well, okay? So just be aware, it's all really sort of centers around the setup of employees and contractors centers around this screen, all right? It doesn't matter how you get to it, okay? They're all stored here in the same place. So as I get out my highlighter here, kind of introduce that, we notice here, show right up here, okay, has two checkboxes. By default, it checks both of them, all right? And so if I want to filter down to just say my contractors, I can uncheck employees and boom, there's my contractors. Okay, if I scroll through it, I'm looking at my contractors. If I uncheck employees and uncheck contractors, I'm now looking at just my employees. Okay? But the software by default is going to check both until you uncheck it. Again, everybody, contractors, employees are all set up here. Like I said, you can filter to see one or the other by simply checking or unchecking those boxes. You can also filter by department. So let's say I am looking at my employees, and you've got a department here, like right here under my employee ID, right here in the middle, I've got employee ID 6 and then department pastoral for my senior pastor, Larry. Okay, if you use these department codes, which, I think we create some, but typically they're user defined, is I can go, okay, I want to see my employees based on their particular department assignment. Okay, so if I go, all right, I'm going to uncheck everybody but music, boom, and click show those selected. There's my employee there. All right, it's, and the employee list does display that as well. But if you've got a lot of employees, that filter by department will allow you to find those employees by department very quickly and easily. Okay. Over here to the right, we've got a list of all of our payees and contractors together. So if I click this is a search box essentially. So if I click in there and I start typing the name, notice there I've typed in T, it brings up any of my employees or contractors that have T in their name. Okay, but it's the enhanced searches you have everywhere in Church Windows. The more characters you type, the shorter the list becomes because fewer records meet that combination of criteria. Okay, I can also click the down arrow and scroll through the list. Important to point out, notice those that have a C after their name, those are identified, or those are contractors in our payroll database or employee file or contractor file. The rest are employees, of course. To add an employee or contractor, I simply click the Add Employee Contractor button, and it presents me with two choices, employee or contractor. Okay? Once I make that selection, then the rest of the screen becomes live. Okay? Contractors and employees are set up very similarly. They're different, but they're similar in some respects, okay, in terms of how they're set up. Contractors are typically easier because we don't have taxes to worry about, right? No withholding, no Social Security match, no nothing like that. All we're doing is paying them, and they're generating and they're receiving a 1099 at the end of the year, okay? So if we choose, we're here really to kind of look at employees. But if I go, okay, I'm going to click on, I click contractor and I didn't mean to click contractor. As long as I don't save it, when I cancel and I click, are you sure you want to cancel adding this contractor? And I click yes, it removes it. Okay, nothing's set up. I can now go back to my add employee contractor and choose employee now. Okay, now the window becomes live. Okay. It's cursors flashing in the name field. All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some details here. I mean, I think this is fairly straightforward in terms of what's required. But down the left-hand side here, notice we've got three tabs, HR, tax, and totals. Those are the three main tabs in payroll that you need when dealing with employees that you need to be concerned with. Okay, but it opens to the HR tab automatically. The HR tab and the tax tab have several tabs across the top of those. So HR opens to general, which is where we enter the employee name and address and department, enter their Social Security information, address, job title, etc., things like that, okay? If they're a pastor or minister, you're going to definitely check the minister box there, okay? So, I'm going to go ahead and complete this information as it is entered on the employee's W-4 form, okay? But again, these three tabs, the HR, the tax, and the totals are exactly as described. One is the human resources set up at component about a part of it. The tax is the tax component, which is where you've got federal tax, state tax, local, miscellaneous. And totals are the totals tab is simply the totals for the employee for all of their pay years or contractor for their pay years summarized, okay? So if I cancel out of that, and I'm going to say yes to canceling out of the employee, and I go to my senior pastor here, Larry, and I go to totals, notice all of the previous years. He's been with this church a long time. He's got all of his years of information are here summarized with wages broken down by quarter for both, earnings and amounts withheld and everything. And that's true for everybody, okay? There really isn't much more to the totals tab than that. So I'm going to move on past that pretty quick, okay? But again, to go back to this, the main fundamental here about this is, of course, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about taxes. Folks, you need to get a completed W-4 from your employees. That is your basis upon which you're going to enter all of this information, name, address, Social Security information, address, all of everything that they're requesting with regards to their federal taxes and typically state and local miscellaneous is all going to be gathered from that W-4. Contractors, you're going to get a completed W-9. Same thing. It includes all of the information that you need to complete the setup of virtually all of this. Okay? So if we look at Larry here, again, we see his name, he's checked as minister, his social security number, his address information. If I go to pay rates and hours, here, this is where the, pay type is entered. Is the employee hourly or salaried? Okay, how often are they paid under their pay period? Okay. Also, notice here, checking account. This is where I'm setting up the checking account for Larry, for where his pay is being deducted from at the bank. Okay. Then down at the bottom, we've got these two tabs, standard rates and hours per pay period. This is where we set up the actual pay based on the selection of pay type and pay period that we've entered. Okay. We have this feature over here on the right called calculate pay amount based on annual salary. Let me go back to add employee contractor here again, and we're going to call this one John Doe. Okay. If I now go to pay hours and rates, here I can choose hourly or salaried. If we go to hourly or salaried, let's say he's paid semi-monthly. He gets 24 checks in the year. Not if you were bi-weekly, that would be 26 paychecks in the year every 2 weeks versus twice a month. So 2 more checks in the year for bi-weekly than semi-monthly, or weekly, monthly, or quarterly. But let's just say he is paid semi-monthly and he's salaried and his annual salary is $37,000 a year. Okay. If I enter that amount and click calculate, notice it says amount, pay period amount. And if I click the create pay label, it now adds the pay label called regular with the pay rate here. And I now need to complete simply the employee's expense account and the employee's FICA expense account. Okay. So let's say he's our custodian, one of our new part-time custodian. So we choose that. And then over here, we go over and choose our FICA church portion of FICA. Okay. Expense account. No hours were required to be entered for a salaried employee. For an hourly employee, folks, they are. Okay. If you do not enter hours for an hourly employee, the software will not calculate anything for them until you get that entered. Okay. You don't have to use this calculate pay period amount based on annual salary, but I'll tell you, it sure makes it easy and fast, and it's right. Okay. But as I go through this now, I've done here, notice my save is lit up. I may want to save my work more often than less, right? If I don't want to have to go back and enter it if something happens, Church Windows crashes or something. So I'm going to go ahead and click save to save that. Okay. But notice we've got other tabs, allowances. Okay. Allowances would be typically for things like if a minister has a housing allowance or an automobile or mileage reimbursement or books and publications, refund or reimbursement for the pastor or an allowance for them to go out and get new reading materials and what have you. So we would set those up here. Notice if we click, we have to choose it from a list. So I've got a variety of allowances that are set up here: automobile, mileage, housing, health savings account, etc. Okay, that's where I would set that up. This person as a custodian is not have any allowances, so I'm going to move right past that to my deductions tab. Now here with the new custodian, I might have something. This would be not tax deductions, folks, right? These are deductions for things like pension contributions or insurance, health insurance or medical or dental or vision insurance contributions that the employee is having deducted from their pay to then pay on to that company or insurance company or what have you. Okay. So let's say we do have in health insurance deduction for him, and it's asking us what date do we want this to start. It's fine to leave it as 1/1 of 2025. It just has to be, the date has to be on or before the day of the first pay for that employee. But I'm leaving it as 1/1/25. It's not going to retroactively, folks, go back and calculate something. It's just when does it start to go into effect. So we click OK. So now it's set up as every pay. I can change that if I wish, but I'm going to leave it as every pay. It's why I've done it. It's easy to administer. I can now enter the amount that they're having deducted for their health insurance contribution, or I can enter in a percent. Okay? It's my choice depending on what it is that how we're having that deducted, probably how I would have to base that on what their premium amount is or their contribution amount is. But let's say it's going to be $35 per pay. Okay, tab over, and I can now choose where that deduction amount is going to go to. So we're going to do health and life insurance. That's now set up. Okay. Employment tab shows various information: hire date, termination date, last review, next review, any notes that I want to make about that employee. When were their last changes to pay rates? So maybe an employee, when they get a new a raise, it'll record when that pay raise was last entered and saved. Okay, date of change, pay rate, and edited, and who did that. Okay. So in this case, let's say we hired our new part-time custodian on September 15th. Perfect. Direct deposit. If you are choosing to set up and utilize the direct deposit feature in Church Windows Payroll, you can do that. You just check use direct deposit, enter the employee's account and routing information, and enter that, and they're set up like your other employees if you use that. It's optional. It is not required. Files and documents are simply some additional documents and information you can track and associate with the employee or contractor file. Maybe you want to scan that W-4 or W-9 form and attach that so you have a record of it for that employee. You know, maybe that's just a really good use of that. Okay. All right. So again, to add a file, I would just choose add. Folks, this is everywhere in Church Windows: donations, accounting, payroll, membership. You can attach files and documents virtually anywhere in the software. Just be aware it's there, and you can bring it up later, and it's backed up as part of the backup file as well. Okay. I'm going to save my progress. Now let's go to our tax tab. Again, folks, federal, state, local, miscellaneous taxes. The W-4 for the employee is where this software gathers its information about this. Okay. So you're going to use that. I mean, it shows right there, what is their federal filing status per the document: single, married, head of household. Assuming they've been hired after January 1 of 2020, the software is going to check the box, use 2020 or later W-4 form, and then per that line information on the W-4, you're going to enter those amounts, if applicable, per what the employee's entered. Okay, my employer doesn't decide what my taxable status is or setup is. I decide that. You decide that. We each as employees decide what our taxes are going to be. Okay? It really stresses the importance of ensuring that W-4 is received and completed and received and you have it in hand. Otherwise, you have no idea what they want. This is what tells you. Does the employee want to have an additional amount or percent withheld for federal tax? We use this all the time, folks, based on lower income earners not having federal income tax withheld. We get this call all the time. We instruct them to ask the employee to specify how much they want to have withheld every paycheck. Is there a retirement plan they're contributing to? If it's a minister, do they want to have their self-employment tax withheld? If they're wanting to have taxes withheld based on the tax tables, definitely check use tax tables. And we're going to choose that 941 taxes payable account for where those taxes will be credited to until we decide to pay the 941 through EFTPS. State tax tab is this very similar. You've got to make sure you're choosing the correct withholding state. For those of you that have no state tax, please bear with us while we go through this. But you have every state in the union here. You know, you basically choose the state, you enter the information accordingly. Some states have multiple filing status. In this case, we're in Ohio. We have one just called all. Similarly, has an additional amount or percent and use tax tables, and you can enter an exemption amount for that for the employee, and there's going to be a state tax liability as well. Local tax tab for any of you, for those of you that are like us here in Ohio that have local taxes. If you don't, great, bypass that tab. But if you do, and you've got to get those set up, you got to choose it from the list. So if it's Columbus here, he's in Columbus, starts 1/1/25. I can set up an additional withholding amount, and then I have to choose the city tax tab, city tax, county tax payable for where to send those taxes each pay. Finally, again, we're not going to be going into this in terms of the setup of these. This is just setting up the employees and contractors. But miscellaneous tax tab, more and more of these folks are popping up around the country, okay? That basically it's not a state tax, it's not a local tax, it's a miscellaneous tax. FMLA or contributions or something, just basically a transit tax in Oregon is a common one that we hear about a lot. Just basically they're a miscellaneous tax, and Church Windows Payroll supports those setup of those. If you need the miscellaneous tax, it's not state or local, use that. You can set that up. Same thing, you choose it once it's set up, link it to the appropriate account to credit in accounting, and then and it'll ask you when to start it as well, but we're going to save that. Okay, so our work is done here. So with regards to that, I can now go in and calculate a mock payroll for the employee and test it. Okay, so if I now go to, then I'm going to come back and spend the last couple of minutes talking about contractors. If I now go to payroll, calculate payroll, I'm just going to put in today's date for everything. Why? Because I'm not posting anything. I'm just examining it. I go to next. I go to specific. Uncheck all. I check John Doe. I go to next. Here is his pay rate. If I go to the deductions, that is not there. That is an intro. Okay, I've figured that out, folks, right? This is why I'm doing this, is because his deduction for his health insurance is not there. I have to check that. So we're going to go back into employees, contractors. We're going to go to John Doe's record again. So let's find John. Let's go to the deductions tab. Oh, it didn't save it. All right. So we're going to find his health insurance. We're going to leave it. We're going to put in the amount of the $35 per pay, and we're going to save it. And I'm going to choose that health life insurance liability, tab off it, save it again. Okay. Now let's try calculating our payroll one more time. Again, putting in pay date of today and everything. So we're going to cancel out of it for posting, specific, uncheck all, John Doe, next. His pay rate is there. There's the insurance deduction. Perfect. This is exactly what I want. No allowances or other additions to pay. I'm good. Next. This, folks, in the posting selection screen is where I can examine this without posting anything. Click Browse Payments right here. Here is what his net pay amount would be based on my current setup. Okay. Total tax deductions, other deductions, no allowances, net pay $1,262.41. Down the left side, amount withheld for federal tax, state tax, local, Social Security, and Medicare. Okay. Again, go to local miscellaneous tax if applicable and check that. Okay. But I go, okay, everything looks good here. All right. And if I just click OK or cancel out of it, I want to click yes. Notice here at the bottom right, and I can't stress this enough, folks, clicking next will post the payroll. I am not clicking next, all right? I am just canceling out of this, okay? I've examined the pay. I don't need to go any further. That browse payments is exactly what the net pay is going to be based on the setup that I have, and to me, it's fine. I click cancel. It says, are you sure you want to cancel pay calculation? Great, done. I've checked his pay. John's pay, it looks good. I have nothing to void. I don't have to go up to void individual pay up here or anything to void anything because I didn't click next at that screen. Okay. All right. So couple more things, just a couple things, little things about contractors here. Okay. As I said, if I go to a contractor, so let's say Clark's Organ Repair, same things, folks. I've got HR tax and totals, right? I've got tabs as well, but don't have allowances, no deductions, pay rates. The services provided is a pay label that you key in. It's not a list that you choose like you do from the employees for regular or overtime or additional or what have you. So if I'm setting up a new contractor, okay, right, and I go to the pay rates tab, there's nothing there. I have to key in what I'm paying, what the name of the label is. It's a very common support question. Well, why don't I get this selection like I do for my employees? Because it's not the same. It's different. All right, I'm going to cancel that because I don't want to have to deal with that. So here we are, Clark's organ repair, his pay rate, the expense account it's charging, the checking account that it's being deducted from. Again, folks, in the 2624, I believe 1, or 2624, I think it is 1, you now have the ability to be able to set up and use direct deposit for not only employees, but for contractors as well. Okay, just a reminder. Taxes, you can back up federal and state withholding for contractors. I never see that, honestly. You can, but honestly, it becomes a different filing, if my understanding is correct. So you have to submit and file that differently for contractors than you do as part of your 941 totals. So it's different documentation, but I don't see it, so I don't typically talk about it, but you can, okay? But everything else in terms of linking that to the expense accounts and the checking account, right? It's an expense and an asset. There is no tax liability for them unless you decide to use the tax tab and back up their federal withholding and their state tax withholding, okay, amounts. It's your choice. All right, and same thing, you've got totals for your contractors as you've paid them. Let me go back to Joe Greenthumb. I think I've got a history in there for him. Oh, I thought I did, but I don't. But again, you've got very similar setup and function, folks. But just be aware, you just have to learn to work with this screen. This is the groundwork upon which setup of the contractors and employees. Contractors that are set up in payroll are used or based, and this definitely for pay employees as well. Okay, just and one final reminder, if you own and work with Church Windows Accounting, you can pay your contractors through accounting and still generate a 1099. You don't have to set them up and pay them through payroll. Okay, just a friendly reminder. All right, there's no requirement to set up and pay contractors through payroll. You can do it through accounting if you wish. Okay, all right, folks, that is where I'm going to leave things for today.